It's amazing stuff, right? They say that a man travels the world in search of what he needs, only to come home to find it. During his military service and extensive travel, our next speaker found out that maybe the entire world is home. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nicholas Walters.
All right, guys, so I'm not going to give a speech in like the sense of it, and instead I'm just going to pretty much give a talk. And when I say that, I mean like a highlight of my life and a couple takeaways that I've gotten on my 27 short years on this earth. So, born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, raised in Akron, Michigan, graduated high school in 2009, and then moved out of my parents' house and in with some friends. I did 2 semesters of college there and then kind of dropped out, right? I was young. And then I moved to Tennessee. One of my friends actually owned a bar down there. So I packed up my shitty little Pontiac Sunbird and I hit the road, man. And this is how I knew I was not in Michigan anymore, right? I was a server at Buffalo Wild Wings. And the first time that they let me go, there was a couple, a guy and a girl. And I got their food. And in Michigan, we say pop, right? So I went up to the table and I was like, hey, can I get you guys another pop? And the dude looks at me, he's like, pop, round here we call it Coke or soda. Goddamn, you a Yankee, ain't you, boy? And I was like, oh, shit, man. So I lived there for a year and then moved back to Michigan and started working jobs I didn't like, right? And I was like, man, I need to go back to school or do something. I didn't know what it was, so I Googled the United States Navy and did about a half-hour research. I said, that's what I'm going to do. So 4 months later, I was alone on a bus filled with people heading to boot camp in Chicago, Illinois. And 3 months later, I emerged a member of the United States military. And then it was off to San Diego. It was my first duty station on board an aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson. Just to give you guys an idea how big these ships are when they deploy, there's anywhere between 5,000 and 5,500 people. So they're like floating cities, man. It was crazy. And I did 2 glorious years on board this ship, mopping floors, chipping paint, and sanding rust. So you can imagine when it was my time to go, I was so upset, right? I hated it. But after that, I got a new job, and it was a construction mechanic, a CB here in Port Arnemy. So again, I packed my car and drove out here, and we had a 3-month mechanic school. Past that, thank God for coffee and Red Bulls. Probably wouldn't have made it. And then it was off to Mississippi where I had to do expeditionary combat school. So that was really cool. It was super hot there. Sweated a lot. It was terrible. But Bourbon Street, New Orleans was actually like an hour and a half away. So I remember just going there on the weekends, and that place is awesome. It's just like you see on TV. At 23, that was a great time. And back here to California where we ramped up for deployment. Now, my first deployment was to the Philippines, and that was a humanitarian mission, so I found myself on a plane, man, flying halfway around the world, and I got off, and I was like, man, this is like a new planet out here. It was crazy. I've never been, in America, but now I'm overseas, and there was 32 of us that went, and we stayed in hotels, and it's like they say, work hard, party hard. So the 32 of us that went there, only 31 came back with the group. And I was the unfortunate one who didn't make it. To make a long story short, I fell off a karaoke bar onto a pile of rocks in the ocean, and they had to fly me back to Japan to get dental work. So partying hard, I got to see another country because of that. That was pretty cool. But I'm missing a tooth now, so I'm like half a hillbilly. I did live in Tennessee, so that's, So from there, it was back to California, and I had a little bit of money saved up from deployment. And I like taking risks, right? So I was like, I'm going to buy and sell a vehicle, right? That sounds cool. Make a little money. And so I bought a pickup truck. And it's funny how life works, because me and my friends have been kicking around the idea of sailing. And the guy who actually bought the pickup was like, hey, man, if you take another $100 off, I'll take you out on a sailboat fishing trip to the islands, you and some friends. I was like, hell yeah, man, all right. So we shook hands. And he came through like 3 weeks later. It was, he took us out. And I remember he started the engine up, and we're taking off, and the boat's vibrating. We get out past the break wall, and he points the bow of the boat into the wind, and he's yelling out, "Grab this line, do this." And we raise that head sail up, and whoosh, the wind catches it, and now the boat's kind of tipped over a little bit. And then he unfurls that head sail, whoosh. Now the boat's tipped over a little bit more, man, and we're moving. I was terrified. It was exhilarating. And I was like, dang, you could hear the waves slapping the hull. And I was like, this is beautiful. Anyways, we made it out to the islands and caught a shit ton of fish. It was awesome. Drank a lot of beer, had a great time. And then I knew I was hooked, right? I was like, dang. And a month later, I ended up buying a sailboat. Me and my friend split it. And I networked around the docks, and a bunch of older people thought it was awesome. Like, wow, that's really brave of you. So they taught me how to sail, and I did that for about a year. Sailed around, and my time in the Navy was up, so I packed up my shit and moved back to Michigan. Did a huge cross-country road trip. It was awesome. And when I got back, I got right into school again. But I missed sailing. I missed, like, the California vibes. So I contacted the local yacht club there in Bay City, Michigan. And I managed to talk my way onto a race crew. It was like no experience, right? So I raced sailboats that summer, and the culmination of that was the Mackinac race, which is one of the largest freshwater sailboat races in the world. It's, I think it's about 300 miles. Took us 45 hours to complete. We finished 45th in our division and 5th overall, which was amazing. And now it was winter, man, so I was like stir crazy. I'm like going to school. And I was like, man, I want to move back to California. And I was like, how am I going to do it? Well, I don't want to just take my Jeep again. I want to do a huge road trip. So I ended up buying a really cheap conversion van. And me and my dad spent the winter building it into this like extravagant camper for my road trip through the winter. And once spring came around, I loaded it up and took off, man, and moved out here. Did a 30-day road trip. And when I got out here, I actually lived in this thing for 4 months. I was like, shit, I saved money. Pay off some debt, whatever. So did that. Now here I am enrolled in Oxnard and VC as well. I go there. I'll have my associates at the end of this year for transfer. I don't know where I want to go yet. I mean, whatever. I just live day to day. I'm having a good time. And so that's cool, right? And yeah. So that I'm a Navy reservist now, so once a month I'm obligated to go in and do that stuff. And I am actually a RAM member at the Channel Islands Yacht Club, which is a race associate. So this summer I'll be racing out of the Channel Islands Yacht Club. Hopefully I can get in on the Newport to Ensenada race. I think that's a couple day sail, so that would be cool. I know that a lot of that stuff sounds like it's awesome and like, wow, you've lived this cool life, but I'd be lying if I told you that I didn't have fear, anxiety, self-doubt, even some regret along the way. But that's just human. Those are just emotions that you feel, right? But every time I took a risk, and through all that, I've learned to tame those emotions a little bit. It becomes easier, right? So in my short 27 years, I have a couple things that I've learned I want to share with you guys. The first one is to be patient, right? We live in this generation of instant gratification, gimme, 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 now, now, now. And no one wants to wait for anything. I mean, dreams and goals, they take time to mature. They don't happen overnight. And don't let society dictate where you should be at any one point in your life, right? There's more paths than high school, college, job. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes you got to figure yourself out and finding it through travel, adventure, and taking risks. The second thing is to live day to day. You know, don't dwell on the past unless you're looking at maybe to learn from failures and successes. Don't look too far into the future. It's good to set goals and check in on them every once in a while, but don't dwell on it. Instead, kind of put your nose to the grindstone every day and bust your ass, and before you know it, you'll look up and realize that you're already where you want to be. The third thing is to embrace failure, right? No one likes to fail. It hurts. You don't want to, maybe you don't want to let someone down, let yourself down, hurt your ego. But through failure, that's how you learn. You always want advice from an older person. Why? Because they're wise. How'd they get wise? Trial and error, through failure, right? So I say embrace failure because that equates to learning, and learning equals success. And the last thing, which is my bread and butter, is to take risk. Because through risk, whether you fail or succeed, you're going to learn a little bit something about yourself and about the world. And when you take risk, new paths will present themselves to you. For instance, sailing with me, I took a risk to buy a vehicle. The guy who bought it took me sailing. I bought a sailboat, the largest freshwater sailboat, yada, yada, yada. So that's an example right there. And it's like a snowball effect. The more risk you take, the easier they become. And it's really just Newton's law, right? Objects at rest tend to stay at rest, and objects in motion tend to stay in motion. So I encourage you guys to take the steps to put yourselves in motion today. Thank you.